Back on the 11th of November 2006, Sony released the PS3 console, with an intricate yet powerful CPU based on the cell architecture. But we've all heard about this countless times, so instead we're going to be taking a look at the other side of the PS3, the graphics chip. Taking a look inside the PS3 reveals it uses a graphics chip called the RSX Reality. It comes clocked in at 500MHz on core and makes use of 256MB of VRAM, which comes clocked in at 650MHz. This combined allows for a performance throughput of 400.4 gigaflops. In the real world, you can purchase a card which has virtually the same specifications as this. The card in question is the Geforce 700 GTX. The version we have here is the EVGA version, which has a lovely cooler and funnily enough only actually costs us £7.80. Ironic, isn't it? They commonly sell for under £10 and the same as that in dollars. For comparison, it comes clocked in at 430MHz on core and still retains that 256MB of GDDR3 VRAM, but this time clocked slightly behind at 600MHz. It even has 24 pixel and 8 vertex pipelines to boot. However, deep under the hood they had to make a few clever changes so that the PS3 GPU could function well for the console. The node was shrunk down to 90nm from 110nm to reduce power consumption as the chip would be in a confined space. As for ROPs, these were halved as the modifications further down the line were designed to make up for this removal. Post-transformer lighting cache saw a 50% increase to accommodate for the cut down ROPs. Moreover, in an effort to counter this, L1 and L2 cache saw themselves doubled. The last major difference was that the GTX 7800 uses a 256 memory bit bus to access the VRAM. Meanwhile, the PS3 uses a 128-bit memory bus to allow PS3 developers to use local and system RAM with lesser performance hit. Of course, this was a risky move as the PS3 was already very difficult to develop for, and this would only increase tensions with developers. But in the real world, we all know the PS3 saw widespread optimizations and longer real-world usage. As well, the GTX 7800 does only support DirectX 9, but this still gives us a lot of room to see how they both compare. Let's get on with some benchmarks. In games such as Skyrim, we see the PS3 one with a standard range of medium settings in the 720p resolution. Textures look a little bit muddy, but the game is locked in at 30fps, and it ran great and looked pretty good even if the textures were, as I said, a bit muddy. I wouldn't really complain about this, and overall it is definitely more than playable. However, the PC version sees that the 7800 GTX can only play games in the 720p resolution with low settings selected. This gave us a return of 22 frames per second on average, with minimums down to 12 frames per second at the very worst of times. Really, something that I was quite shocked by, but lowering the resolution a bit more would definitely give you a much more playable experience, and so far I'm going to say the PS3 has won this purely because that console optimization has pulled off some amazing things. Games like Crysis show us the might of the PS3 with it running in the advanced CryEngine 3 engine. Of course, this is in the 720p resolution with medium to high settings. The game in all honesty looked great, even if the resolution was just a tad low. However, the 7800 GTX shows that even for a card older than the PS3, it was more than possible to keep up in the advanced 900p resolution, with medium and low options selected. Although looking great once again, I'd currently wager that the PS3 version was the better of the two, as it had not only advanced lighting effects, but a more stable experience. Games such as Half-Life used an advanced version of the engine that has since been ported to the PC, but at the time this boasted advanced lighting as well as a basic form of HDR. Of course, it runs at a locked 30fps in the 720p resolution with a mixture of medium and high settings. Arguably a major selling point of the PC were the early Valve games, and with how the 7800 GTX performs in this game, it's no exception. The game running in the advanced 900p resolution once again, with high and HDR settings turned on, returns with an amazing experience that was altogether superior to that of the PS3, as averages remained at a solid 45 frames per second, and minimums only ever dipped down to 29 frames per second at the very worst of times. But although we can see these comparisons, we see that the PS3 has its strengths that lie in console optimizations, especially in those later titles that needed every ounce of power, seconded only by those such as Crysis, which needed to use 100% of power from the get-go. But the PS3 is not without its disadvantages. You can't tweak the experience, and many early titles such as Half-Life 2 run poorly, for something that was capable of so much better. Of course, you're also locked in at 30 frames per second, and you have to be limited to the 720p resolution in a majority of the games. but I'd be willing to let this slide, especially when you look at some of the graphically amazing titles such as The Last of Us, which many users on a 7800 GTX could never even hope to run, yet alone if you showed that off back when the card was released. Of course, it doesn't even match the beautiful landscapes of the Uncharted series or the incredibly demanding Grand Theft Auto 5, which could be a struggle to run even on today's computers. But then again, the 7800 GTX, while not offering you these experiences graphically, it can play a large range of newer indie titles, ranging from simple 2D titles like Game Dev Tycoon to more advanced, although not indie games like CSGO. Of course, you also benefit from getting to emulate any console previous to that of the PS3 thanks to the raw graphical horsepower the 7800 GTX offers you. Really, these chips are too different to compare. Yes, they're based on the same specifications and they're from the same architecture, but really, the GTX offers you the freedom to play what you want when you want, and even today, as long as you don't mind lowering a few of those settings or even dropping that resolution, it's ideal for some newer indie titles or those older AAA releases. But the RSX chip in the PS3 has some amazing optimizations that allow for the stunning titles previously mentioned. Admittedly, you're locked down to the PS3 library, but even then it is so large and extensive, you'd be spoiled for choice for years to come. Thank you very much for watching, good night! And a large thank you to all our subscribers of the channel, and the support that you give.